Thank you very much, Dee, for all the confessions that you sent in over the weekend. Some of them are like 37 pages long.
Really?
All been read, and some of them are paragraph long. So, anyway, thank you very much, Dee, for all of them. It's a good crowd. Let's welcome into the Collector Brother Matthews, obviously, here, and normally in the pub. But I think by the sound of it, probably... where are you, Sister Susie, at the moment?
I am in a field in Pilton, otherwise known as Glastonbury Festival.
I didn't think it had started.
It doesn't. It opens to the public on Wednesday, but I'm working here all week.
Got a special pass.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so assuming that you can hear us all fine and dandy.
I can.
Excellent. Okay, so here we go with today's confession, which comes from Camilla. Camilla, thank you so much for today's confession. Simon and the Confessional Collective. I was listening to Monday's programme and the hilarious French verb slot. Well, I mean, we did do some French verbs. It's not really a new feature.
No.
Where Matt and Simon decline a verb. Is that what you do?
Yeah.
Anyway, thank you, Camilla. Anyway, she found it hilarious.
Oh, right.
When a dim and distant memory from school started to come to light. It's been many years since this event happened, so I'm writing to you, hopefully, to be absolved of my sins. I take you back to my school days in the mid-1980s. I attended a high school for young ladies in Buckinghamshire. Back then in the classrooms, we had good old-fashioned blackboards and erasers were the norm. And in the language labs, we had to write on whiteboards that needed cleaning with water to wash off the previous lesson's marker notes. I don't think wipe-off markers had been invented at this time. The whiteboard cleaner consisted of a handheld, sponge-fronted plastic thing that had a central fillable water reservoir and a screw-in nozzle that could be positioned to squirt out the water when the top was pressed down.
Goodness me.
Now, obviously, attentive Confessions listeners will know there's only one reason why all that detail has been given.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to disappoint you.
Yeah.
So come with me, says Camilla, into my French lesson. Our French teacher was a very Scottish lady. We shall call her Mrs. Mac. And she had a very thick Scottish accent.
Oh, good.
Quite what our French accent sounded like, I have no idea, but obviously they wouldn't have been anywhere as good as yours, Father Simon. Bien sûr. It was a ritual with Mrs. Mac that at the start of every lesson, she would swoop into the classroom, pick up the whiteboard eraser and start cleaning the board using the very angular side-to-side movements with both her elbows in and out. Normally the whole class behind her would mimic this movement, and a bit like, what's the time, Mr. Wolf? We'd stop dead if she ever turned round.
Yeah.
It's like we are in your class, Camilla. Well, me and my friend Desdemona... It's Camilla and Desdemona. Arrived. It's a school for young ladies.
It is,
Wow.
isn't it? Yeah.
Arrived at class a little bit early one lesson, and we came up with a cunning plan. We still used ink cartridge fountain pens in those days. So how hilarious would it be to empty a few into the water reservoir and leave it just for Mrs. Mac to use? In the toilets, we dutifully squeezed the contents of 3 black ink cartridges into the water reservoir of the board eraser, topped it up with water, and get this, turn the nozzle round to face the oblivious person who would be doing the cleaning.
Oh, dear.
And we all know who that's about to be. We sat back in class giggling at the fun that was about to unfold. What we hadn't quite bargained for was Mrs. Mac rocking up, wearing a very frilly, very 80s Spandau Ballet-inspired, very white silk blouse.
Oh, dear.
Our horror must have been palpable. What happened next was sort of slow motion, really. There was no time to retrieve the inked-up board cleaner. We had to just sit there and watch as the inevitable happened. 2 or 3 sturdy squirts was all it took before there was a shriek and the board cleaner was dropped to the floor. It looked as though she'd been paintballing with Jackson Pollock. It was spectacular. My yellow chicken jeans kicked in and I ran forward on my jelly legs, retrieving the board cleaner, saying, I'll go wash it out, Mrs. Mac. Meanwhile, all I could hear was a very Scottish accent.
Oh, yeah.
Over to you, Simon. As you know, I don't do these.
Do you not?
No.
Oh, come on.
A very Scottish accent saying, just you wait. I'm leaving this in the ear of the beholder. I'll find out who is responsible for this. And then it was repeated. Just you wait, I'll find... And so on. Back in the toilets, I was shaking with fear when in stepped Mrs. Mack with black ink. You got an email?
Yeah.
With black ink down the front of her blouse. I can't remember what I said, but I fluffed something about not knowing who had done it after dabbing herself down with toilet paper, which actually made it worse. We both returned to the class. Luckily, I don't recollect either any inquest into the event other than exiting the classroom as soon as possible. Exiting the classroom as soon as possible after the lesson had finished and never having eye contact with her ever again. Simon and the Collective, I'm not seeking forgiveness from Mrs. Mack, as I actually passed my French O-level, so she must have been doing something right. I am, however, asking forgiveness for what must have been a very strange French accent mixed with a very heavy Scottish twang that I subjected people to on many holidays with my family over the following years. J'attends ton verdict, says Camilla. Or something like that. I think that was about. What's the French for verdict? I didn't check that.
Not sure.
We'll look that one up. Anyway, spectacular events with the board cleaner with a whole load of ink inside. Sister Susie, though, wincing, I think, in that.
Oh yeah, Camilla, it's just so hard because, you know, you're having a bit of a joke and you were trying to be funny, but I think it was a bit mean, really. And she had such a nice blouse on and she probably wouldn't be able to wear that again, and you ruined it.
Yes.
And I can't forgive you either. So I'm just not forgiven for me.
Brother Matthew.
I mean, who wears a floaty frilly blouse to work and doesn't expect something's going to happen? That would be my point. Unlucky for wearing the blouse, Mrs. Mack.
It's her fault.
It is in a way, isn't it? Isn't it in a way? And I think the nation was demanding an accent there as well.
Okay.
Scottish accent, really.
No.
But apart from that, I'm going to forgive.
Okay. People's... Of course he is. People's verdict, please. 61054. Start your message with Simon. Do you forgive Camilla? 61054 on the text. First word is Simon, or Simon at greatesthitsradio.co.uk. On the People's Verdict, then, on tonight's confession, which came from Camilla, a story from the language labs of old in the mid-80s. And the language labs where they had a whiteboard cleaner consisting of a handheld, sponge-fronted plastic thing, which then Mrs. Mack, who, not realising that it was now filled with ink from a cartridge, squirted it all over her fabulous, frilly, very 80s white silk blouse. It's Camilla's fault. It's Desdemona's fault.
Yeah.
People's verdict like this.
So Tony and Sam in Stafford say, not forgiven. Not sure why Camilla had realised a mistake had been made when they saw the blouse. It wouldn't have been okay if she was wearing anything else either. Mark from Bromley, though, says forgiven. She clearly didn't care, as there was no inquest. The shirt was probably a gift she wanted to get rid of. And Leanne in Buckingham says, forgiven. I think the fact that you carried what you learnt with you on holidays is impressive enough for forgiveness. I got an A for my French GCSE, but all I can remember is je suis au foot, which probably isn't even right.
Merci bien. Camilla, thank you. Camilla gets the smart speaker, which in French is smart speaker, probably.
Smart speaker.
It's not made any more French but by saying it in that outrageous accent. So Camilla gets the smart speaker. Thank you very much. So if you have a confession for us, you send it to confessions@greatesthitsradio.co.uk. Maybe an accent is required. I'm not very good on some. Maybe a language lab confession.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe a school-based confession. Teachers. We love all of those. Send it to confessions@greatesthitsradio.co.uk. Okay. It's confession time. Let's see if the line is working to Glastonbury, where producer Susie is hard at work. Hello.
Hello there.
All right. Okay. It's slight satellite delay.
Wow.
So I'm going to count to 3, then you go 4. 1, 2, 3.
4.
Okay.
Wow.
Okay. Well, it's going to be so a slight delayed reaction. Okay, but we're just very thrilled that you're here and part of the team as ever. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay. Fine. There we go. So,
I'm here.
Okay, just check it. Okay, that's very good. Tonight's confession, and the winner of the Drive Time smart speaker goes to Rowena. Rowena is the winner already. So Rowena says, it's a slightly unusual confession, actually. It's quite difficult to work out where it's heading.
I love those.
Okay. Father Simon, my confession goes back to when I was 16, and it was the summer of 2000, and I was working for a well-known holiday company. This year was my first proper job. Now, there are really 2 confessions here, a read one, get one free special offer, but they are kind of connected. First of all, I was working in a children's play area for this aforementioned company and was responsible for selling sweets. And those cold ice drinks with loads of ice in spectacular colours. You know the kind, they have a big stirry thing to keep keep it all stirred. That's a technical term, by the way, the stirry thing. For a good few weeks, all was going well, apart from the kids, who seemed to be going absolutely crazy. And their parents were complaining about them being really, really hyper. Someone's reversing. I just thought it was holiday excitement and maybe bad parenting. Just get some discipline in their lives, some boundaries. Teach them right and wrong. Some people. Anyway, my drinks machine was such a hit with the kids. They loved it, and they could not get enough. I'd been working really hard and refilling it regularly. Very regularly. I had it down to a fine art. What I hadn't been told is that the drinks machine syrup should actually be watered down.
Yes.
This I had not done. For about 6 weeks, the kids had been having concentrated syrup with enough syrupy goodness in one helping to last a month, with citric acid stabilizer, colouring and preservative for extra flavour. Oops. It wasn't until management wanted to know how I was getting through so much syrup, I used a whole year's supply in 6 weeks, that alarms started ringing, and it was only at that point that we realised that I hadn't been watering the syrup down, and as no one told me, it wasn't my fault. So it wasn't actually a parenting issue, but it was a management issue. Poor management, they should have told me. Following this mistake, I was then moved into the fast food area. We move on to confession number 2. I was responsible, says Rowena, for cooking and selling the fast food.
Okay.
Now, I hadn't cooked for anyone before, and no one really told me how to cook.
Oh, right.
I'd never cooked anything other than maybe toast and once beans to go on the toast. But that was it. Again, no training was given, and I was told... Where this came from, I have no idea. I was told, if it floats, it's cooked. This was great information, as I hadn't realised cooking was so easy.
Yeah.
Well, as you can imagine, the fast food area was very busy during the holiday times. And it was during this busy time that my colleague came to ask for a chicken burger. This was bad timing and unprofessional on his behalf, but I wanted to help. Coming right up, I said, all professional and everything. I put it in the fryer and turned my back. When next I looked, it was floating, so I served it up. I gave it to my colleague, who went off to eat it. He then came back and said, "Did you cook this?" I said, "Of course I did." "Well, it's still totally frozen," he says. All I could say was, "It floated, so it's cooked, and that's that." He then handed it to me, and it was actually very cold.
Oh.
I have no idea. This is the line, really. There's a lot going on in this final line.
Okay.
I have no idea if anyone got food poisoning that year, but I imagine it was really quite likely.
Oh. Okay.
And then another line. I now work in HR and always stress to my managers how important training is. so as to avoid these kind of incidents. Well, Rowena, what a case.
Wow.
So we have two confessions. First of all, there's this overdose of syrup.
Yeah.
Of course, you water it down. And secondly, if it floats, it's cooked. I must try that out on Nigel when he comes in.
Yeah.
Sister Susie, with a voice of authority, I think.
Well, Rowena, I can't forgive you on either of accounts. Full syrup to children.
Yes.
It must have been a manic situation, and the poor parents, I say. And if it cooks, it floats. You believe that?
That's not even the kind of thing that they used to say. Oh, there's another lorry reversing.
Yeah, just coming in now.
But no one has ever said if it floats, it's cooked. Where did that come from? Anyway, what I also like particularly is that it's never her fault. So it's bad management for the first one, and it's bad management for the second one. Brother Matthew.
Well, I'm going to agree with Rowena. It is definitely not her fault. She
Of course
wasn't trained.
it's her fault.
Which of us could honestly say we know how to work one of those slushy machines and how much syrup to put in? We don't know.
Everybody knows.
Nobody knows that.
Everybody
and also,
knows.
How to
I
operate
know.
a deep fat fryer. No one knows how to use those
Everybody
things.
knows.
No one knows.
Susie knows.
No one knows.
Everybody
so,
knows.
For that reason,
know.
because everyone agrees with me that no one knows how to use those things, I forgive. And she's taken it into HR as well.
Oh.
Good for you, Rowena. Taking one for the team.
She might be our boss. You never know.
Could be.
Okay, so it's the people's verdict. Do you forgive Rowena? Yes or no?
That's still reversing.
61054 on the text.
Very busy here.
It is very busy. 61054. 61054. Start your message with Simon, or you can email simon@greatesthitsradio.co.uk. That's what. But just before the news, we had a top confession, which involved those fizzy drinks with spectacular colours, with too much syrup and not enough water. In fact, no water at all. Followed on by the useful phrase to remember when you're cooking: if it floats, it's cooked. Rowena gets the smart speaker. Does she get forgiven, though?
Well, Delia says, not her fault.
Delia,
I worked for a certain motorway services as a 16-year-old, and my training was essentially, it's cooked when it's golden and floating. Not forgiven, says Mick and Jen from Birmingham. Does she not realise that things do float that are not cooked, such as beach balls, boats, humans? And Derek
Useful.
Kirby in Beverley says, not forgiven. However, her default excuse of blaming management shows that a career in HR is perfect for Rowena.
Excellent, very
Yeah.
good. So if you are in HR, maybe you have a confession. Don't forget, we change all the names so everything can be
Obviously.
as anonymous as you like. So HR confessions, summer job confessions, they would be good. And maybe confessions from the kitchen.
Yeah.
If it floats, it's cooked. If that's the kind of thing that you got told, we'd love to hear about it. In a confession, you send it to confessions@greatesthitsradio, and if we use it, you get a smart speaker. Well, it's confession time, which means that from somewhere we're going to find Sister Susie, I think, is still at Glastonbury.
I am indeed.
Oh, excellent. There you are. Any reversing lorries nearby?
No.
At the moment?
No, but lots of public have arrived on the site today, so it's full of people.
Really? Oh, it's going to get in the way, really.
Oh, dear.
Do you think it's a lot easier but without the people?
Yeah, it is.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh,
Get
right.
out of the way, people.
Oh, dear.
Okay, so it's confession time. Today's comes from Chaz. Thank you, Chaz. Who says, Dear Father Simon and the bit part supporting players.
Very good.
I'm very sorry about
Very good.
Not forgiven.
My confession goes back a few years, but I can't remember exactly how many. Too many orange juices on the night in question, I think, and also in between. They blurred the timelines, but the details stick out for reasons which will become apparent. It was somewhere around 2009, 2010, 2011. 2012, maybe? Could be 13.
Okay.
Anyway,
Yeah.
it took place in a field in West Sussex. You see, friends and I would travel around following a particular hobby of ours. Part of that was the awesome social scene which came with the world of camping. That's what we're talking about. I would usually camp in a small pop-up tent. Actually, it's quite appropriate for Glastonbury,
Yes,
really.
it
and all
does,
the
yeah.
Summer holiday things. I would usually camp in a small pop-up tent at the side of a caravan which belonged to friends. We should call these friends James and Jenny, the caravan owners. As your listeners are probably aware, on caravans there are normally lockers at the front where gas bottles, batteries and bits and bobs are stored. Then in front of that there would be the hitch, which attaches to the tow ball on the car at the exact height to make it the definition of a trip hazard. Now, on one of these memorable trips, James and Jenny, the caravan owners, invited friends, Cecilia and Dougal. They would be joining us, and get this, they would be sleeping in their car, in which they had curtains.
Curtains?
Yes, curtains in their car, so as to afford them the required privacy.
Obviously.
I was in my tent, the caravan and awning were set up, and we were away. Orange juice started to flow, and dinner was enjoyed, then more orange juice. And then we eventually retired to our respective pits. And then, at some ungodly hour, I can't tell you exactly when, we know that you're a bit blurry on the details, Chaz, but it was very dark and it's late June, so that narrows it down something like between 1 and 4. I was suddenly woken to a sound that went beep, beep, and then beep. And it remained on a constant high-pitched beep. Like when somebody flatlines in an episode of Casualty.
Oh, yeah.
All right. So a kind of a warning sound. I shan't tell you what exactly went through my mind and my lips, but it was something along the lines of, good heavens, what is going on at this time of day? I stumbled out of my sleeping bag, unzipped the tent, and wandered in the vague direction of the noise, and fell headlong over the hitch on the front of the caravan, of course. After much more muttering, something like, oh, whoops, I made it to my feet, and I worked out that the noise was coming from the locker on the front of the caravan belonging to James and Jenny. I opened it. It was never kept locked, and we were in a safe site. I found a small box which I didn't recognise was the culprit for the rude awakening. This was attached to the battery with a couple of crocodile clips, and a cable went from the other end of the box into a dark field. Thank you. I disconnected the crocodile clips and the noise stopped. Ha! I said, take that, sucker. I then proceeded to fall over the hitch again, picked myself up and made it back to bed. Father Simon, it is now that I have to say, I have to seek forgiveness from Dougal. For, as was swiftly and aggressively made clear, his continuous positive airway pressure machine, which was an essential sleep aid due to his sleep apnea, was a machine he needed. This is sleep apnea is, of course, a sleeping disorder in which pauses of breathing occur more than normally. You see, this mask was being powered by the caravan battery and was beeping to signify that the power supply was getting low. If you have one, they're vital for all-round well-being and specifically being able to breathe. A sudden disconnect can have serious consequences. Let me tell you, words were said. English words. Ancient English words.
Yeah.
Said with restraint, but power. Fortunately, I can report that Dougal did not suffer any adverse effects, and the battery was able to be charged sufficiently for the following night. However, my reckless disconnection could have caused an incident of a more grave nature. However, we went on to have plenty of happy nights with orange juice aplenty. I'm at the mercy of the collective. Bam, bam. Anyway, just wanted to wait for that. So now, you see, this is quite an interesting tale. It'd be very interesting to see what you guys make of this, because, good fade, I thought...
Yeah, I thought so.
What is Dougal doing, plugging his very important machine onto a battery without telling anybody? Anyways, let's see what Sister Susie makes of this.
Well, Chaz, it might be Dougal should have probably told you what was going on and that you plugged it in. However, you shouldn't just unplug things willy-nilly. That could have been anything. You could have run out the car battery or anything, and for that reason, it could have had really serious consequences. And I don't forgive you, I'm afraid.
Well, I mean... brother from another gutter.
Well, I'll tell you this. Cecilia and Dougal with their curtains in their car. Whoever heard of that?
Yes, exactly.
Not me. It's a bit weird. Let me paint an alternative picture here.
Yes.
What if Chaz had not been in that pop-up tent and hadn't heard the beeps? Then the power was running out on his machine, and then Dougal would have been curtains for Dougal then, wouldn't it?
Very good.
Wouldn't it?
But he already had
Goodness
curtains.
me, callback. So that is the reason I choose to forgive.
I mean, you'd think he's probably just plugged it in for his cassette player or something like
yes,
that.
cassette player. Yes.
I think that's so. You wouldn't automatically assume it was for a continuous positive airway pressure.
Yeah.
Could have been any electrical device.
Could have been. Yes,
good.
That's true.
Which needs to be recharged. Anyway,
Most of them do. Yeah.
61054. Start your message with Simon. Forgiven or not? Is Chaz forgiven? 61054. Start your message with Simon. Thank you very much indeed. They're all very good. Confession time. Today's came from Chaz. It was the camper van Beethoven. Anyway, it was a splendid camping tale, which ultimately involved Chaz unplugging a thing from the front of the caravan, which caused a continuous positive airway pressure machine to stop working, with could have been serious consequences, but not, fortunately, for us. Otherwise, we wouldn't have read it out. Anyway, the people's verdict is in. Here it comes.
So Lynn says, forgiven. Who has a car with curtains in them? And then they take it camping. No one in Middlesbrough would do this. I do hope, though, that they were Laura Ashley curtains.
Oh, okay.
Mel Lewis
Cecilia and Dougal sound like Laura Ashley.
They do.
Couple.
Mel Lewis from Stonehenge, not forgiven. Never mind the sleep thing. Excuse me. He could have unplugged the wine fridge. Oh, and I used to have a car tent with curtains. They're
Really?
great and more comfy than a ground sheet. A
car tent?
Indeed, yes. And Gary from Ipswich says, forgiven. As a fellow sufferer of sleep apnea, I can happily say it's not the end of the world if someone switches off your CPAP machine.
Oh, CPAP, okay.
Yes. My 8-year-old does it to me most mornings to wake me up for breakfast. However, I'm not a doctor, so don't take this as gospel.
Yes, don't try that at home.
Yeah.
Anyway, so always take medical advice.
Yes.
So if you have a confession, maybe it's a holiday, because we're coming into big holiday season, maybe a festival, because lots of camping there going on. I don't know, you probably got a story involving the caravan next door, or the tent that you had, or the single pop-up tent which Chaz had. If you got a tale, we would like to swap it for a smart speaker. You send it to confessions@greatesthitsradio. That'll be all right. So Sister Susie is at Glasgow. Brother Matthew is sitting opposite. Here's today's tale. It comes from Sparky. Simon and the jury, my story takes place in the early 90s. I had secured a job with a large national electronics company which had a branch in every high street. My introduction to the company and first few weeks of employment were overseen by my team leader, who I shall refer to as Mike. Mike was basically a friendly individual who, being ex-Royal Navy, was definitely a team player and eager to please. I did notice fairly quickly, though, that he could become a little, shall we say, unsettled and short-tempered under fire. But he was fine with me, so I would say we had a reasonable working relationship. Over time, though, it became apparent that Mike wasn't admired universally amongst my peers, and there were various mutterings about him being a creep and generally sycophantic to anyone in management. So now there was a typical drink dispensing machine that we had, coffees, teas, hot chocolate, that kind of thing, sited in the upstairs canteen. Managers formed the opinion, though, that far too much time was wasted by engineers taking a 25-yard walk to the machine, placing 10p in the slot and collecting a hot drink. So it was decided that the machine should be relocated to a site within the workshop where an official eye could be kept on any time wasters. Well, Mike was at his worst. Please, sir, let me do it. I can do it, sir. No need to employ a plumber, sir. I have all my own tools, sir. I'll come in on my day off, sir. It won't cost the company a penny. I mean, that's what it sounded like to us, but we had prejudiced ears. There was much muttering and disapproving tutting from the foot soldiers. The day for the relocation dawned, and I was somewhat surprised to find Mike busy at work on his day off. He'd already disconnected and moved a somewhat weighty machine and was now running new copper water pipes and a power feed around and through the workshop walls to enable reconnection. More sarcasm and disapproval was voiced by various colleagues as they arrived for their day's work. Creep and other, perhaps less socially acceptable phrases were muttered. Well, there was much sawing and drilling and smells of copper pipe joint soldering and general huffing and puffing throughout the morning until eventually lunchtime arrived. Mike emerged from the work area with a self-congratulatory swagger. The machine was now sited in its new efficient position, even being cleaned and thoroughly restocked too. Mike strolled over to me. Phew, bit of a job, but it's all good now. Fancy a pint? Okay, I replied. I just need a quick visit to the loo before I go, and I'll meet you there. So I downed tools and went off to the toilet. Here, in the wash basin area, I saw the results of Mike's efforts. Gleaming new copper pipes with many soldered joints as they travelled around the walls before disappearing through the brickwork and out to the machine. Obviously, these were supported by wall brackets and piles of brick dust still sat on the floor under the brackets. He'd been very busy and he'd done a good job too. I attended to my ablutions, grabbed my coat and walked off to spend a happy, if less responsible hour with my workmates in the pub. Well, Mike was having a great time, so it'd be fair to say that he was on something of a high as we strolled back to work. We all entered the depot and resumed our duties. As previously mentioned, when Mike came under fire, he possessed the ability to undergo a radical change in character. And it was at this point that we all witnessed the extraordinary transformation. He emerged from inspecting his new plumbing, which he'd fitted just prior to leaving for lunch, ruddy-faced, somewhat unsettled and in a foul mood, because every single joint that he had carefully soldered had leaked. The brick dust under each joint was wet, and you could see water seeping out of each joint. This was a disaster. His embarrassment was intense, and his anger was certainly not lessened by numerous and various hilarious jibes from around the workshop. Think Hulk, and you're there.
Okay.
Without further ado, the new piping was disconnected, ripped off the wall in a knee-jerk reaction, and reinstalled over the course of the afternoon, put back where it belonged. Success. Now to the reason that I'm writing to you, Father Simon. See, when I returned slightly ahead of Mike, you might remember he was enjoying a, "Ooh, what a super employee you are, Mike," kind of discussion with the manager. I felt the need to enjoy the use of the facilities following the consumed lunchtime ale. And whilst attending to my needs, I thought that I hatched what was going to be a hilarious scheme. After washing my hands, I didn't dry them, but repeatedly covered each soldered joint, there are about 10 or so, in droplets of water. The drips then parted company with the joint and fell to the floor, thereby wetting the brick dust in the perfect simulation of a leaking joint. Oh, how I laughed, and what a great joke. Even Mike will see the hilarious side of this, I thought. Well, how mistaken I was. Mike was apoplectic for months. Hang on, this is how he felt. That's how he felt. He was snappy, he was sweary, and he was puce at all times. He never actually got over this total ruination of his finest hour. I never did own up to my actions in truth, although I'd heard rumours of Mike's ability to switch from congenial to pitbull. I'd never actually witnessed it before. I never intended to humiliate Mike, but the situation spiraled out of control far quicker than I believe anyone could have anticipated due to his unstable temperament, accompanied by the none-too-gentle jibes from workmates. But apologies are due, but the incident still makes me smile. But with the passage of time, I need to seek absolution from the board. I am entirely in your hands. Starting with Sister Susie in a field where she's getting ready to go to the cheese and grain.
I wish it's nice, actually. You should visit it. And yeah, often Glastonbury people do go there on the way. However, back to Sparky, I just think this is plain mean. Maybe he had a temper. You didn't have to goad him. It just wasn't. If he did it to me, I wouldn't see the funny side either. So I just don't appreciate it. And I just think you might have gone to a lot of effort, but
yes,
essentially, you were the big meanie, and I don't forgive you.
Oh, wow, very nice kind of Dalek-y noise there, live from Glastonbury. And in general, Brother Matthew doesn't like jolly japes, do you?
Well,
really?
no, not normally, but I sense that there is something different going on with this story. Why on earth was Mike giving up his time to do all this with the pipes? I think there were ulterior motives at play here. He was looking for something else, and he got it straight back at him. Unlucky sunshine. I certainly felt that this confession was plumbing the depths. Oh yes. So that is why I forgive.
Dear.
I mean, that is just
plumbing the depths, Suze.
People's verdict 61054. Do you forgive Sparky, yes or no? 61054. First word is Simon. The people's verdict. Tonight's confession came from Sparky, who messed up a colleague's rewired and transported coffee machine by flicking water at solder joint. Anyway, Sparky gets the smart speaker, but this is the people's verdict. Here it is.
So Michelle in 5 says, not forgiven. Forget Mike. I think Sparky needs forgiveness from the workshop men. No hot drinks all day. I'll bet they were parched. Ian from Thirlby says, forgiven. Having served an apprenticeship and worked in similar environments,
yes,
I forgive. It goes with the territory. The said plumber should have had more belief in his abilities and realised that someone was trying to wind him up. Happened to me often. Lol. And finally, Harvey says, forgiven. It's all water under the bridge now. He can just pipe down.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is that supposed to be the denouement? Is it that's supposed to be your
Yes.
final flourish?
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Steve, for that. So maybe you've got a confession about management. I mean, maybe that would be quite a fun thing. So if you have one, confessions@greatesthitsradio.co.uk.